What's up, y'all? I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut, and this is episode 19 of Lawns Across America. So welcome back, y'all. It is the middle of June. We are heading very quickly into summer. I know there's still a ton of rain across the country and a lot of places. I've been watching some different channels that focus on farming and farm reporting and things like that, and realizing that this is a really bad year for rain. A lot of farm fields are completely flooded out. They haven't been able to get on them. I watch a channel called Millennial Farmer. He's actually got, if you find him on YouTube, you really enjoy his channel. He's actually got an area in Minnesota where he's at, where he actually has gotten most of his stuff planted. He's probably ahead of a lot of what I'm seeing report-wise, but he's got a final 40 acres that just won't dry out. That's just super muddy, and apparently that's happening in a lot of cases around this country. And I realize that it's also affecting our crops, even though our crop is lawns. All that rain and not being able to get out on those lawns because of that rain is also causing problems for us, and we actually have a question about that this week that we'll be addressing. But speaking of rain, I wanted to talk to you guys or remind you about a video that I did this past weekend on the Lawn Care Nut channel. It's a really important one to check out. And it's all about setting up your in-ground irrigation system to water properly. And the idea is to know how to put down 1/2 inch of water for each zone. The reason that comes important is because even though we're getting all this rain right now around a lot of the country, at some point summer is going to kick in and you're going to have 4 or 5 days of dry heat with no cloud cover, and it's going to be over 85 degrees, and your lawn, especially cool season lawns, are going to start to wilt. They're going to have this hangover period. They're going to be stunted, and you're going to have to start supplementing with your irrigation. So head on over to the channel and check that out, as well as this coming week we're going to expound on that strategy. Again, it's the tuna can challenge and how to put down 1/2 inch of water if you have to water manually using a sprinkler that you move around. I'm going to show you how to set up a watering plan that way, completely overcomplicate it, so you can spend several hours in your lawn having fun. And that's always the idea, is to have a little bit of fun, to learn your land, and to understand how to, head off problems. And in this case, head off problems with, lack of irrigation, too much heat, that type of thing. So make sure you head over to the Lawn Care Nut channel and check that out. Now, the reason that came up is because I actually had one of my neighbors stop by this week. I was out in my lawn doing the tuna can challenge, and he asked me, he stopped by with his wife. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I explained to him what I was doing. I was understanding how to put down 1/2 inch of water for each zone. And he said, "Yeah, that's a good thing to learn, because I actually ended up with a water bill of well over $500 last month." And that's because, as many of you know that live in Florida, we actually came out of like a 4-week dry period where we had temperatures in the 90s, which is normal for us this time of year. That's not a big deal. But temperatures in the 90s with no cloud cover and zero rain. And that's the part that was missing, was those afternoon cloud builds, which give us relief from the direct sun, as well as then that afternoon rainstorm that we get almost every day here on the west coast of Florida, which is what we call our rainy season. We didn't have that. And so folks that didn't have their irrigation set up or didn't have an irrigation plan were just literally spraying and praying, and apparently to the tune of a $500 water bill. So that's another reason why you should stop over and check out that video there, so you can understand what it's like to water, so you won't get that $500 water bill. Or if you do, at least you'll understand, well, that's what it took for me to keep my lawn green, instead of just going out and spraying and praying and turning on your sprinklers when you think you can and then being surprised by the $500 water bill. So a lot going on there, a lot to unpack, but it is definitely something that I think would be important to all of you. So definitely head over and check out the Lawn Care Nut channel on YouTube. Now, for those of you that watch this podcast, Lawns Across America, here on YouTube, you're going to notice a different background. I did have to move the podcast into my office here inside the house, because this is where the air conditioning works. As you guys have probably figured out, it is not the best idea to do a podcast in your garage in Florida in the middle of the summer. It just gets too hot. And thank you to those of you who gave me different suggestions about maybe I can install a mini split or get a portable, air conditioning unit over at Lowe's. I did see those over there that, you can vent out of a window or whatever, but it was just much cheaper, much quicker, and much easier to move my equipment inside the house rather than to install a mini split that's going to cause me to drill through the wall and try to hide things behind bushes and all kinds of stuff like that, or invest a couple $100 in a portable air conditioner. I just thought it'd be smarter and easier to move it inside, especially because this is a podcast and only a fraction of our downloads or views come from YouTube. The majority come from iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all those kind of places. So if you are noticing this background and you want to comment on it, please let me know. I can make some changes in here. I'm sure I'll upgrade it, do some different things to make it look a little bit more lawn care-ish. But I did bring with me my flamingo. Now, this flamingo here is the mate to the one that Connor Ward kleptoed from my lawn when he was here last year, and he sent that all the way to Australia, and then Ben did a lot of damage to it. And now I believe that my companion has been sent to Ryan Knorr. So at some point, I think I'll be able to get that back. But in the meantime, I've got the mate here. He is all by himself here, and I did bring him in to go ahead and keep a little bit of some kind of lawn care flair here on the podcast for those of you that like to watch on YouTube. Speaking of watering and in-ground sprinkler systems, we're not going to go much farther on this, but I did want to say those of you that do have an irrigation system, please take this seriously. I've actually found over the years when I worked at True Green, the people that were the worst at watering were the ones that had automatic irrigation or automatic sprinkler systems. And typically that was because it's a set it and forget it type deal. And so you just assume that it's good to go, but you don't take into account the seasonal fluctuation, the seasonal change. You might have somebody that comes and closes it down and blows it out if you're up north, and blows it out for the fall and the winter. And then in the spring they come and turn it back on, and maybe you're relying on them to set things up. But then again, who knows that they really know? Have they actually tested the zones? Probably not, especially if those zones were, and I say tested the zones, I mean it's to their output or their outlay, especially if it was a system that they didn't actually install, if you bought it from somewhere else, and now the people that are doing your maintenance are different. You just don't know what's happened. And a lot of times, maybe you're just relying on whatever schedule was set up from the previous owner of the house or what the original installer set up. And I've always found for some reason that there's this thing that it's 10 minutes per zone. I don't know if that's a standard that people go for or what, but oftentimes when I worked for True Green, I would find people that had really bad thatch problems, and we would go in, I would help them find their sprinkler box or their sprinkler controller in a lot of cases. They didn't even know where it was. And we would open it up, we would turn the zones on manually, and would find out that they were all set for 10 minutes each. It didn't matter how many heads were in the zone, what the overlap was front and back, expanse, shade, parkways, it didn't matter. 10 minutes a zone every single day, set it and forget it. And that is a recipe for a thatch problem. The reason that is because when we want to water deep and infrequent. Now, this is a universal rule, no matter if you have clay soil or if you have loamy soil or even sandy soil or warm season turf or cool season turf. Typically, when you want to water deep and infrequent. You want to get down 1/2 inch of water each time you water, and you want to separate the waterings by about 3 days. Now, you might have to move that a little bit closer as the summer gets hotter. You may have to do some afternoon day syringing. And then, of course, in the rainy season or in the late spring now where you're still getting some rain, you may only have to do that once a week. The idea is, though, when you do have to supplement what Mother Nature is not giving you, you want to put down 1/2 inch of water. That's considered a deep watering. And what that will do is it will push the water down, and it will force the roots of the grass to also go down with it. Of course, a good idea at that time, if you're trying to create deep roots, would be to apply some of our Air 8 product, because the Air 8 product is going to break bonds, especially in hard clay soil, and it's going to help the water to dive down deeper and let the roots chase it. So if you're somebody that's wondering, hey, what's a good way to help with my watering coming into the summer? Besides getting maybe some hydrotane, which also needs to be watered in. That's one of the biggest problems with hydrotane, or biggest challenges, is people don't water it in, and so it ends up sticking to the leaves on top. Instead of you watering it, it's got to get to the soil so it can stick to the root structure. And with the liquid, you got to water that in right away. But another thing that you can do besides trying hydrotane is you can use the Air 8 product to break bonds, to loosen the soil, basically just rip things away so the water can get down deeper and penetrate. So that's another use for Air 8, is to help your watering that you're doing, your deep and frequent watering, to get even deeper. That said, I did want to give an update on my Empire Zoysia on the side. A lot of folks have asked, hey, Alan, how do you like your Zoysia? What are some things you've noticed about it? And I can do formal videos about that or whatever, but I figured today I wanted to just ramble a little bit, talk about some of the things that I've noticed, because it really is a great grass. And I even used to find it growing up north, and that was what I always found kind of interesting, was especially those of you that are from the Chicagoland area over by there, especially from the south side of Chicago, over by I'm talking like Riverdale, Dalton, over by Sibley Boulevard, also known as 147th Street on the south side. Maybe somewhere between 147th between I don't know, maybe if I were over a Stony Island, even all the way over to Cicero. I think that gets into Hazel Crest and that Country Club Hills over there. But the idea is 147th Street going up and down, and I'm mainly talking about right in Dalton, Dolton, Dalton, Illinois, on Sibley Boulevard. There are some Zoysia lawns there. I know because I used to take care of them. And those are in the city of Dalton. It might be South Holland, but I think they're Dalton. The two kind of intersect right there. And I know we've got some folks that listen to this podcast that are from the South Holland, Dalton area, because they'll comment every once in a while. But there are a few Zoysia lawns that I've seen, and I know there's more. There's some in Philadelphia. I know there's a lot up through Maryland. I've heard a lot of people comment about it. Zoysia is a warm season turf. It's not meant to be grown in areas where it snows. It's just not. But there was a company back through the 80s, and I think even persisted up into the 2000s, that used to sell Zoysia plugs as like this miracle grass, and they would advertise them in the back of the Parade magazine. I don't know if you guys ever remember what Parade magazine was. Probably a lot of you that listen to this podcast don't even know what a magazine is. You haven't even touched one. And if you have, though, the Parade magazine used to be something that came inside the daily paper, at least, or the Sunday paper. At least it did for us growing up. I remember you'd get the St. Pete Times, and in the St. Pete Times would be folded in the Parade magazine. And my dad used to read it. I never did, but people in the back of Parade magazine up north in Chicago, they would advertise these miracle grass plugs. And I think it was Meyer Zoysia, which was one of the original cultivars, or maybe the original Zoysia that was brought to this country. And they would sell you literally, dozens of plugs, maybe hundreds, and it wasn't that expensive. And they would ship them to you, and you would plant those, and they would tell you, look, it's going to take 2 or 3 years for these plugs to fully fill in. But when you do, you're going to have a grass that is weed-free, and it's not going to have problems with insects, and it's going to be thick, and it's going to be soft, and it's going to be lush, and it's going to be not going to grow as fast as Kentucky bluegrass. All these different miracle things about Zoysia, and I thought that was always very interesting. And there are a few of those lawns that still persist today in the Chicagoland area, and I'm sure that a lot of you can find them too. The way that you will know a Zoysia lawn growing in a cool season area out of its place is that it will be dormant brown all the way through June typically. And in fact, if you're up north and you have a Zoysia lawn right now, you may still not even be green with the way this year is going. It may take a little bit longer. Zoysia is not going to fully really green up and realize its full true potential until daytime temps are over 80, and definitely nighttime temps cannot be below 60. It just will not green up. So that's a very interesting thing. Now, one of the things, though, about that advertising, and the reason that I bring this up, just because I think it's funny that they advertised that, and apparently it was pretty popular because there's a lot of people I've run across that have said, oh yeah, I used to see those same ads in the Parade magazine. But one of the things that's interesting about that is their advertising was true. Zoysia, and this is one of the things I've noticed about it the most, Zoysia is slow to establish, number one. Even from sod, it took a while before I really felt like this stuff is growing and it's in place and it's solid and it's, how do I say, it's kind of like, I don't know, like I trusted it. Like it took I had it installed in October, and it wasn't until, like mid-April that I really thought, okay, I really feel like this Zoysia is now got its own foothold. It took that little long. Now, that's over our winter time. Our winter does get, into the 60s, and we had a couple days this year that maybe barely broke below 40 at night. And that's not conducive to Zoysia either. But either way, when I compared it to my St. Augustine grass that I also had sodded at the same time, the St. Augustine was up and rearing and ready to go literally within 3 weeks. Just boom, just ready to fly. Whereas the Zoysia was kind of like, I'm going to settle in here a little bit. And that goes back to the Parade advertising, the Parade magazine advertising. When they talked about the plugs up north, they were telling people, look, it's going to take a couple of years for this Zoysia lawn to fill in. So that was truth in advertising. But the real truth in advertising came in the fact of its ability to choke out weeds. And this is what I wanted to talk to you all about. Now, I have Empire Zoysia. I'm sure all other Zoysia is going to work the same. But because Zoysia spreads and thickens and weaves itself together, and that's the term I want to use, it weaves itself together like a thick blanket with rhizomes and stolons, it definitely is a grass type that I feel very confident saying can choke out weeds when it's thick. I can see it right now in my Zoysia over here on the side. And when I say that, I've got torpedo grass that is invading big time. I can see it. I also have Bermuda grass that's invading big time because I'll see the seed stalks coming up all throughout my Zoysia lawn. Everywhere I can see the seed heads popping up. But after I mow and I go look, I do not find hardly any Bermuda. Maybe I'll find a rhizome maybe I'll find a Bermuda stolon here or there that's popped up and creeped across the top. But for the most part, I'm telling you, it's almost like its own landscape fabric. The Zoysia just stops. It just keeps it out. Those seed heads can get up, but the Bermuda is not able to take a hold. Same with the torpedo grass, which I never thought would happen. But that torpedo grass is only taking hold in areas where during the last 4 weeks, where I did have some watering challenges. You're going to have them here and there. There's going to be spots where they're just not covered as well, especially here. This house has been here since 2004. It's had different sprinkler heads added to it. I've had to add some. Some have broken. I find every time I dig in this lawn, I find old sprinkler pipes. So things have been moved around, even in just the 14 years that this house has been here. So the coverage is a little off and different. And I've got one spot in my Zoysia lawn that I know it doesn't get probably the amount of water that it truly needs. I'm going to be okay now that the rainy season is here. But during that 4-week period when we had those 90-degree temps, no cloud cover. By the way, people take for granted how much cloud cover also helps your lawn in just cooling it off, not just water. But I didn't have the cloud cover, and I had a couple spots of the zoysia that thinned out, got hurt or damaged, and that is where the torpedo grass has taken a foothold. So I'll control that with a little bit of quinclorac. But over and above that, I just don't have major weed problems. I really don't. And if I do have areas where I have weeds breaking out, I just go in with frequent mowing, and I'm actually able to literally mow them out. This is the other thing. This is the first time I've ever been able to literally mow out weeds just by frequent mowing. Now, frequent mowing will always help keep weeds out. It does 100% of the time. That's a cultural practice that should always be your first defense against weeds, is to try to mow them out. But I've never had to actually get rid of 99% of the weeds. But so far in my zoysia lawn, frequent mowing is keeping out 98, 99% of the broadleaf weeds. So I just wanted to give you that update with my zoysia there. Now, a couple other things. Continuing our conversation about my Empire zoysia here, interestingly enough, a lot of people will say that it doesn't tend to hold its color long, or that sometimes zoysia, if it gets stressed a little bit, it will lose its color. And I can tell you St. Augustine is that way for sure, especially Floritam. If it's nice and dark blue and it gets stressed out from heat and you don't get enough water, when it comes back, it's not necessarily going to turn as blue-green as it did before. It'll need a little bit of a boost there. But I haven't had that problem with my zoysia. I put the Carbon X down. Now, I did a double app of Carbon X, 1.5 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 on it. I did that to show you guys that Carbon X isn't going to burn anything, which is something we'll talk about in a minute. But either way, my color in my zoysia is holding dark blue. And I use the term blue because it looks blue to me. Dark blue-green, it's holding very, very true. And I applied, it's been well over a month now since I applied there. You'll see an update on that coming up over in the next couple weeks on the Lawn Care Nut channel. But I personally haven't had any problem with it holding its color as long as I've kept it well irrigated. So I don't know, maybe I'm just lucky. Maybe I have good soil because I use a lot of good soil amendments, or maybe it's just the Carbon X in general. But either way, my zoysia has not lost its color and it's holding very strong. Now, speaking of Carbon X, I did want to talk about that because a lot of people have asked me, hey, can Carbon X burn the lawn? Is there an issue with it? And I want to go into the whole idea of burning the lawn in general. But the first thing I wanted to talk about is what makes Carbon X special. Because as you guys know, Matt Martin, he does not oversell his products. He tends to undersell them so that way they can overdeliver. And I totally respect that. And I think that's a good way to go. And I try to follow that type of a mantra as well. However, now that I've been using Carbon X, I can tell you some things about it that I'm seeing and some things that I like about it. And the first thing is what is special about it? So here's what I think special about it. And I learned this just when those guys were here a couple weeks ago and I was talking a little bit more to them. Hearing things or reading things, on podcasts or reading things online, it's not the same as when you actually can talk to somebody and ask them questions in real time. And it didn't click for me until I was able to talk to Matt and John in person to understand a little bit more about how Carbon X works. So the first thing is the biochar. That's really the base of the product. And that's what those black pellets are that you'll see when you get it. Let me explain what that is. So biochar is a byproduct of the biodiesel industry. When they're done doing whatever they got to do to create biodiesel, they end up with biochar. You could think of biochar as similar to charcoal. It's not, because it has a different property, but that's basically what it is. It's spent organic material that is now extremely porous and extremely absorbent. Those are the two main things. And it also makes good structure in soil. So it can be used for something. And of course, biochar has been used for years in gardening, especially in organic gardening or in permaculture. They've been using biochar quite a bit because it does have some really interesting and fun properties and good properties. It serves as condominiums for microbes. Roots can get in there, all kinds of stuff. But that's not really what makes Carbon X so special. It is because we want that in our soil. But here's the second piece. It is literally chicken poop charged biochar. So check this out. So there's a lot of chicken houses, I guess, throughout Kentucky. And one of the things that happens in a chicken house is you have, I don't know how many chickens are in a chicken house, but I've watched, actually speaking of Millennial Farmer, I've watched his channel where he went to a chicken farm. And there are literally hundreds of chickens in these chicken houses. And there are so many chickens in there that the air can get there can be a lot of fumes in the air, I guess is the way to say it. And I'm pretty sure they're ammonia fumes, and that comes from their waste. So just think about this. It's pretty logical, right? If you have hundreds of chickens, or animals of any type, but chickens, peeing and pooping in the same spot in an enclosed area, even if you have it ventilated, that's going to create some fumes. And that is definitely not healthy for the humans that need to work in there. It's probably not real healthy for the chickens either. One thing that I do know that it does to the chickens is as they walk on top of all of this litter, even if they're suspended above it, those fumes can actually do things to their feet. And, chickens, as they're slaughtered, part of the chicken industry is that the feet are sold as a delicacy to certain countries, as well as though I think, those conditions, those fumey conditions, they probably can affect the output or the size of the chicken or whatever. But either way, if you want to be humane, you don't want your chickens breathing in their own poop and pee fumes, right? And you also want the humans that go in to care for those chickens to also not have to breathe in that stuff. So what they discovered is if they put this biochar underneath the chicken house, what the biochar does, because it's so porous and so absorbent, is it sucks all of that fumes, or a good majority of that fumes, out of the air. And this is where I said it's related to charcoal, because you guys all know about a charcoal filter, or if you have a really bad hangover, you can take charcoal caplets to suck up all the toxins in your blood. I mean, charcoal's been used as a filter for a long, long, long time to purify water and things like that. So biochar, which is even better at that, which is even more porous, which is even more absorbent, will suck all those fumes out of the air. Plus, the chickens are pooping and peeing on it anyway, so it absorbs all the physical matter. And then what they do is when that biochar is charged, right, and it needs to be replaced, they take it out. And this is where the magic of Carbon Earth has come in. They have learned how to turn that into a prill that you can now spread on your lawn. And when you spread it on your lawn, all of that goodness that biochar has sucked up is in there. And by the way, chicken poop is full of micronutrients. Everybody knows for years that chicken compost has been excellent for gardens and lawns. It's just had this super odorous smell, obviously, because it's poop. The other thing about the biochar is it doesn't kill the smell all the way, because definitely if you have Carbon X, it smells like success. I tell people it smells like vomited up gas station tacos, but that's not as bad as poop. So it has some smell of success, but not that much, because the biochar holds that in. Now, when you spread that across your lawn, what it does is it slowly releases those nutrients. And I believe that's why my lawn, my Zoysia, and even my St. Augustine is holding its color so long. I believe that's the biochar releasing very, very slowly, because this is organic material that's in that biochar. So the microbes are getting inside of there, and they're breaking that down, and they're releasing that back out into the soil slowly over time. The thing about that is the hunks of biochar, and they are hunks, they're circles of biochar, or whatever they are, they stay in the soil as well. And that then allows a symbiotic relationship between microbes, and then grass roots will grow into those areas, as well as the nutrients that are there. And the biochar will continue helping this exchange between roots, microbes, and other soil organisms. So that is the thing that is really smart and really brilliant about Carbon X, is that exact piece of that puzzle. It's those black prills that are that biochar that's infused with the chicken poop that is loaded with nutrients. So now, of course, Matt does add some synthetic nitrogen to it. That's because we want to boost the nitrogen. We want to give you a faster green up and some good results. But again, it's that biochar infused that just keeps things going. That's also why you'll find some iron in there and some other micronutrients and things that aren't even claimed on the bag. They are in that chicken poop infused biochar. So all of that to say, though, you are not going to burn your lawn with Carbon X. I mean, yes, if you spill it, it'll probably burn. If you spill Milo, I can show you that it will also kill a spot in your lawn, as well as it will stink real bad. But for the most part, putting down Carbon X, even if you put it down too heavy, it's just going to be wasteful, and I promise you your lawn is going to grow really fast, but you're not going to burn it. There's some sort of myth out there that fertilizer can burn a lawn, so that's what we're going to get into next. So with that, the next thing I did want to talk about is people having fear of burning their lawn, because one of the questions I get a lot is, hey, Alan, now that we're in the heat of the summer, can I apply Carbon X? The answer is yes, you can apply it. You're not going to burn anything. However, you may want to back it down to a lighter rate, because I just don't want to push growth too hard in the summer. And we have a question that kind of comes up about this a little bit. But for the most part, you're not going to burn it. There is not a correlation between hot temperatures and fertilizer. The two things don't correlate. Now, it's not a good idea to push a lot of growth. And so if you put down too much nitrogen fertilizer in summer and it's hot and you push the lawn to grow, but it's not irrigated and the heat hits it, even like, again, Kentucky bluegrass does not like temperatures over 85. I don't care how healthy it is. So if you bomb your lawn with heavy nitrogen and you have temperatures over 85, that can burn the lawn out. In other words, that can make it fizzle out or peter out, almost like taking you, if you haven't eaten or had any carbohydrates in several days, and sending you out in the heat and making you sprint for 500 yards. You're going to burn out. You're not burned. The sun didn't burn you, but you're burned out just because you just lit off too fast without the right support. And that's what can happen. But for the most part, fertilizer itself is not physically going to burn your lawn. Now, if you spill it, like I mentioned, it will. But if you're just applying heavy, not going to burn the lawn, so don't be concerned. But what happens is people will go to the store and they don't read what's on the bag, and they end up getting weed and feed, and that can burn the lawn if you put it down in heat without irrigation. But it isn't necessarily the fertilizer by itself that's doing a burn. Even if you applied it at double the rate, that's not the case. It's the weed control. The weed control, remember, weed killer is going to kill a plant. That's what it is. Selective broadleaf weed killer kills plants. It just doesn't kill lawns when it's put down according to the label. But if you put it down too heavy and when it's too hot, that's why a lot of weed controls say not to apply over 85 degrees. Even the granular ones will say that. If you break the rule and you apply that over 85 and you apply it too heavy, then yes, you can burn the lawn. And that's where I go back to saying, when I worked for True Green, thousands and thousands of lawns we treated. We did not burn very many, but the ones that we did burn, I would go out and fix them. That's where I fell in love with a tool called the garden weasel. I know I've heard Pete use a garden weasel before. Pretty much anybody that's ever had to do any kind of lawn repairs in the lawn treatment industry has used a garden weasel. You rough up the area, you put some seed in, you rough up the area again, you drop some Scotch Patchmaster on top, which is what I always used, or peat moss, water it in for the customer, and walk away and hope for the best, and you're usually going to do pretty well. But most of the burns that I came across were burned from weed control. In a lot of cases, what we would find is that it would be at the end of the day, and the specialist would be tired, so he'd be walking a little bit slower, which would equate for a heavier app than normal. And then the other thing would be, because it's later in the day, and late in the day for us was 2 or 3 o'clock, because we would start at 5:30 in the morning. It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's been over 85 all day. They pull the hose on the truck and they spray that weed control, and it's over 85. And that's what would happen, and that would burn the lawn. But it wasn't from fertilizer. And even that was few and far between. So I just wanted to clarify that. From whenever I've seen lawns burned, it's typically from weed control. That was in my professional life, and it's also now when I talk to DIYers. And it's usually from a product that is a granular product that they have put down too heavy because it's a weed and feed, and they figured more was going to be better, and they put it down at an 85-degree temperature in the summer, and it's the weed control that burns the lawn and not the fertilizer. So it's very important, and that's why I teach you guys the why behind everything. It isn't just about going and grabbing this bag and following the label and throwing down. You need to understand why you're doing it, what you're doing, and that way when you get a result that you don't like, you can go back and review and go, all right, I'm not going to do that again. Because typically, if you burn your lawn, it will be the last time you burn your lawn. I've never really known anyone to do it more than once, because typically you learn your lesson from there. If you do burn your lawn, by the way, the biggest cure for it is water. Water every single day, water deep, and do that for a month. And in most cases, in many cases, your lawn will come back. I've even seen lawns burned with Roundup, where someone grabbed Roundup, which is a non-selective herbicide. It will kill pretty much everything that's green in your lawn. They grab that thinking that's something they can use in the lawn, and they go out and hose it down, and they will kill large sections of their lawn. But if you water a lot, and you got to water it quick, in a lot of cases, even that will come back because you didn't get a heavy enough app in some places. The roots survive, some of the crown survive, whatever. A lot of that will come back. If that does happen to you, though, in the fall time, that's when you aerate and overseed, and as always, hope for the best. All right, next, let's jump right into our questions this week. We have some good ones because it's now summertime, so actually the use of your lawns is changing to where in the spring when the kids were in school, you're mowing, you're working on getting it thick, you're working on getting it going, you're killing out the weeds. Now that it's summer, we've talked about this before, now you're starting to enjoy your lawn, and your kids are starting to enjoy the lawn because they're home for the summer and they're starting to play sports on it and all kind of things. So that's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we're approaching lawn care now that it's summer. By the way, if you want to call in and be on the LCN tips line, it's 833-526-8477. That's 833-526-8477, 833 LCN tips. If you want to be on the LCN tips line and possibly have your question read on the air, 833 LCN tips, 833-526-8477. Our first one this week is going to come from Hector, and Hector is in College Station, Texas.
Hey, Alan. This is Hector from College Station, Texas. Gig 'em. Hey, I got got a serious question here. I know that you've been pounding on a lot of rain, and people who say they've had a lot of rain and they haven't really had a lot of rain. Well, we've had a lot of rain. Last week, on one day, we had probably 6 inches of rain, 5 inches, depending on what part of town you were at. And that causes issues for me because I have a commercial-grade riding lawnmower to cut my 1 acre. The issue being is that it's too heavy if it's wet, and it leaves ruts, and it's nasty. And so I got to let it go longer than, my 2 week times per week. I don't know what else to do. I don't really want to sell my commercial lawnmower because it makes my cutting really enjoyable. I can cut my entire acre in about 35 minutes, and that's me taking my time. But at the same time, I'm having to let my grass go really, really long. And also, it can cut grass wet. It doesn't clump because it's commercial grade. However, this $12,000 mower that I got, it's just too heavy. It's a 61-inch deck, and I don't want to buy another garden tractor. Been there, done that, and so I don't really know what else to do except for trade it in, and I don't really want to do that because another zero turn is still pretty heavy. I'm only saving 200-300 pounds. Any suggestions on what I should do about cutting my yard when it's so wet? Thank you, by the way, for all that you do.
Okay, Hector, this is a great question, and it's actually one that I get in some way, shape, or fashion quite often. And I think it's because, I hammer on the idea of mowing correctly, and that if you mow the right way, that is the single best thing you can do for the lawn, is to mow it properly. When I say mow it properly, is to follow the 1/3 rule, and that's what Hector's getting at here, is he's saying, Alan, with all this rain, and he's saying, look, I know a lot of people say there's a lot of rain, but we really have a lot of rain. And again, the farm reports that I've been reading definitely confirm that. Too much rain this year. Things are soggy. Farm fields are soggy. People can't get their corn in the ground. All kinds of challenges. And he's facing that with his crop and his lawn. And so the question is, what do? I don't want to break that 1/3 rule, or he's also saying I don't want to leave ruts in the lawn. And Hector, this is where you're finding that I say lawn care is a weather-driven business. Let's take it away from you and your one single lawn, which is 1 acre, which is bigger than 99% of the people listening here, and it's bigger than my lawn, so it's more to deal with. But let's look at lawn professionals. What do you think about lawn professionals in College Station, Texas, that have big zero turns and big ride-on mowers and things like that? And they actually have to go out and perform service for customers on these lawns. They have to decide, do I cut and make my money and deal with some ruts and some mud, or what do I do? What can I do? Because the thing about the lawn professional is if he skips this week and does the right thing because he doesn't want to leave ruts and he doesn't want to leave mud marks and all that kind of stuff in the lawn, and he comes back next week, he has a double whammy because not only does he not get paid for the week he had to skip, but the next week he comes in, he doesn't get double pay, but he has to do double the work because the lawn is double the growth, right? He's going to have to double cut, maybe triple cut. There's probably a lot more cleanup. Maybe the weed whacking takes longer. The edging definitely would take longer, especially if you have St. Augustine grass, because the St. Augustine will creep out further. There is a lot more work that he has to do. So this is a double whammy for the pros, but you know what they do? They have to weigh out the give and the take and do the best that they can. And as always, they have to hope for the best. Now with us, thank God, we only have to deal with one lawn. We only have to deal with one property. Now yours, Hector, is a lot bigger than most. You're at an acre, so you have a lot more to deal with than most people, but it's still only that one single lawn. So my first piece of advice to you would be, maybe you want to go and invest in a walk-behind mower. A 30-inch, like a Toro Time Master is what I can use, but there's other ones that are on the market there. A 30-inch mower is not ideal for an acre, but it's also not going to weigh nearly as much as your $12,000 zero turn. It's only $1,000 extra investment, and you probably won't have to mow the entire lawn with it. So use that Time Master or 30-inch mower, walk behind. That's not going to cost as much. That's not going to be as heavy. That's not going to leave ruts. It's not going to leave as much mud. And you use that in the worst spots, and then use your zero turn or your rider or whatever you have there. You use that in the areas that you feel more comfortable getting on. And if you can't get it on any areas, then you'll have to use the Time Master to get you through this tough part of the season. Now, the other thing is the 1/3 rule. You're going to end up breaking the 1/3 rule no matter what you do. And let me define the 1/3 rule to everybody. The 1/3 rule when it comes to mowing is you never want to remove more than 1/3 of the grass blade's length in a single mowing. What that means is during the growing season, you may have to mow every 3 or 4 days, because the more you mow, the healthier your lawn will grow. And if you're cutting off a lot of that leaf blade surface, it's growing up to receive the sun. And if you're constantly cutting that off, it's like whacking it off at the knees, and it's not healthy for it. Now, here's the deal. When you got a ton of rain like this, you're going to have to break the 1/3 rule, and you might have to break it for a month straight. You might have to go even 6 weeks where you mow every 2 weeks, which is just terrible. The thought of that is horrible. But what else are you going to do? You don't have a choice. And this is why I say we work in a weather-driven business. If this was computers, we could just run some simple tests on the code. We could troubleshoot. We have a checklist of what we do. When this does this, if this, then that, do this, then that. And you can fix things because you're in a controlled environment. But we're not like that with lawns. We are in a curveball type environment. Mother Nature can always throw unknowns at you anytime, and you have to be willing to adapt to that, and you're going to have to be willing to compromise, and you're going to have to be willing to break rules in order to get through those times when Mother Nature is throwing things at you that are unexpected, that you're not used to dealing with, that make you go against what you know is right. And in this case, you may have to only be able to mow the lawn every 2 weeks, and you may have to invest in that walk behind so that you don't leave ruts. You're going to break that 1/3 rule. Definitely, if you're letting it go every 2 weeks, picking your spots, you're going to be really harming the grass. The thing is you're not going to make a habit of that. It's okay to go through a tough time with the lawn. It's okay to break the rules because you have to. It's okay to hurt it for a little. It's almost like disciplining your children, right? It hurts to discipline your children. They will cry. They won't like it, but it's better for them in the future. It's better for them going down the road. The same thing with the lawn. Let it grow. You don't want to get out there and mow in the rain if you can help it, but sometimes you're going to have to. You're going to have to let it overgrow. You're going to have to go and scalp it because you got to get through this period of unknown when Mother Nature's taking control. But things are going to level off. Things are going to get back to normal, and that's when you can get back into that every day or every 3 or 4 day mow and get things back healthy. So those are the things that I would recommend you do is number 1, Hector, consider getting a lighter mower, a walk behind, not ideal for an acre, but you only have to suck it up for maybe a month or so until things dry up. And then secondly, realize that breaking rules and going against the 1/3 rule, when Mother Nature forces it, it's okay. It's just part of life. It's part of having a relationship with your lawn. It's part of learning your land and knowing how it responds and knowing that later on, whatever you've done to harm it or whatever you've had to do to harm it because nature forced it, you'll be able to rectify that going forward because you're going to give it the best care. Think about all the people out there that don't care for the lawns, where those lawn professionals have had to get out and leave those mud marks or leave those ruts, or they've had to, cut when they didn't want to. If there's no one at home helping that professional out, if there's no one there, caring for that lawn to bring it back, that's when lawns start to go south, is when the homeowners neglect and they just want to send the lawn off to daycare every single day, 12 hours a day. Oh, I'll just let the professional handle it, even though he's only here once a week if he's a lawn cutter, or if they have someone treating the lawn like a True Green Chem lawn, they're only there once every 6 weeks. Well, I'll just leave it off to them. I'll just let the lawn be left in their hands, even though they're only here once every 6 weeks. No, you're a DIYer. You're somebody that cares about it. You're somebody that knows your land. You're actually asking this question, which means you really care about it. So you know that even though you're going to go through this rough point and you're going to have to abuse the lawn a little bit, it's going to hurt. You have to damage it, not abuse it, because I just used an analogy with your kids, so we don't want to use the word abuse in there at the same time. But you're going to have to be hard on the lawn, right? You know that that's going to have to happen for a season or a period, but you know you're going to come out of that season and things are going to get better, and you're going to be there to bring it back along. And by the way, the lawn will be stronger in the long run for it. Next, let's go up to Westfield, Indiana, and let's talk about a clover problem.
Hey, Alan, this is Scott in Westfield, Indiana. Got kind of a two-part question for you. First, I've had some serious clover creeping up here the last couple weeks. Had a little bit of it last summer. Was able to do some spot spray with some Spectracide weed stop. Had some success with that, but definitely came back with a vengeance this year. Just curious if you have any other tips besides the sprays, anything I could do to prevent it from coming back next year. Appreciate some help with that. And then second, really enjoy the backyard. The kids love playing back there and spend a lot of nights playing baseball in the backyard. So things came in great this spring. It's holding on right now, but starting to see some wear and tear. Just curious if you have any ideas for those high traffic areas where the kiddos love to play, things I can do to help keep the lawn nice and lush and thick through there and keep it surviving throughout the summer. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, so Scott's got a two-part question. This is a good one, and this is one that a lot of you are going to face: clover and then foot traffic on the lawn now that it's summer. So first, let's talk about the clover. This is a very interesting one because clover is one of those things, every time I talk about killing clover, people will say, oh, clover's a nitrogen fixer. You need clover in your lawn. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And that's going to be today's key word, which are nitrogen fixing plants. That's today's kind of key word or key term that we're going to explore. What are nitrogen fixers, or what are nitrogen fixing plants? Because I think there's a myth that comes up there, and I don't think people do it on purpose, but it's the way that it comes up. And what they'll do is they'll say that nitrogen-fixing plants are actually adding nitrogen to your soil, like it's some sort of magic thing. Like if you have clover in your lawn, it's sucking nitrogen out of the air, and in some way, shape, or fashion, it's pushing this nitrogen gas out into the soil, and your lawn is enjoying it, and it's helping everybody. And that is true to a certain extent, but I need to explain it to you in a little bit different way, because it's a little bit of a myth about nitrogen fixers and how they actually help your lawn, or do they? So I've got an article here, and I'll flash it on the screen if you're on YouTube, but I got this from a website called Gardening Know-How, but I don't know if that's a legit site or not, but I can tell you that what's written in this article, the author, her name is Heather Rhodes, this is true, this is correct. So this is the article, it's called Nitrogen Nodules and Nitrogen Fixing Plants. Nitrogen for plants is vital to the success of a garden or a lawn. Without sufficient nitrogen, plants will fail and will be unable to grow. Nitrogen is abundant in the world, but most of the nitrogen in the world is a gas, and most plants cannot use nitrogen as a gas. Most plants must rely on the addition of nitrogen to the soil in order to be able to use it, and that's why we fertilize, right? That's me adding that in there. All right, so she continues. There are a few plants that love nitrogen gas, though, and they are able to draw the nitrogen gas from the air, store it in their roots, and these are called nitrogen-fixing plants. So how do plants fix nitrogen? Nitrogen-fixing plants don't pull nitrogen from the air on their own. They actually need help from a common bacteria called Rhizobium. The bacteria infects legume plants, such as peas and beans, and uses the plant to help it draw nitrogen from the air. By the way, clover is in this similar family. The bacteria converts this nitrogen gas and then stores it in the roots of the plant. When the plant stores the nitrogen in the roots, it produces a lump on the root called a nitrogen nodule. This is harmless to the plant, but very beneficial to your garden. So let's stop right there. The key word here is that the clover, or the nitrogen-fixing plants, are pulling that gas out of the air, and then there are bacteria that's in their root structure that called Rhizobium, and those bacteria store up that nitrogen. They're able to convert it. They are a nitrogen-fixing bacteria. They're able to store that nitrogen in nodules in the plant's roots, and in this case, clover. So basically, these bacteria are storing the nitrogen up for the clover's use, not for the lawn's use. They are very selfish. Nitrogen-fixing plants are selfish. They do not share. They are not good for your lawn. Unless, ready? Let's continue. How nitrogen nodules raise the nitrogen in soil. When legumes and other nitrogen-fixing plants, like clover, and the bacteria work together to store the nitrogen, they are creating a green warehouse in your garden. While they are growing, they release very little nitrogen into the soil. But when they are done growing and they die, their decomposition releases the stored nitrogen and increases the total nitrogen in the soil. Their death makes nitrogen for plants available later on. So I'm going to end it right there. Check this out. This is the case. The clover is not sucking nitrogen out of the air and sharing it with your lawn. It's actually doing the opposite. The nitrogen is using its advantage, its superpower, and its symbiotic relationship with these microbes to grab nitrogen out of the air and store it so the clover can take over more spots in your lawn, so it can dominate more of your lawn. It's not sharing, it's using its superpower to kill your lawn. And in fact, if you want to get that nitrogen out, you need to kill the clover. And that's why I wanted to bring this up today, because nitrogen-fixing plants are not friendly to your lawn until you kill them, and then you get the nitrogen. So that's where I'm going to tell you right now, kill the clover, feed the lawn. We should start that. We should make t-shirts. Kill the clover, feed the lawn. Now, I understand you have pollinators and things like that on there, which is another reason why don't keep clover in your lawn. Just don't, and you won't attract the pollinators to the flowers. Keep things mowed off. Don't attract them. Kill that clover before the pollinators even have a chance to care about it and get that nitrogen released into your lawn. So remember, nitrogen-fixing plants do not release the nitrogen until you kill them. So that's why it's a great idea to try to kill them here. Now, I did want to explore one other little concept here, and I don't know if this is true or not, but you all can tell me this, but I know I've heard people talk about, and I've never used steroids, but they talk about guys lifting weights, and that guys that lift steroids, that what can happen is, or lift steroids, guys that use steroids, that what can happen is, if they use steroids improperly or overdose the steroids, at some point, your body will stop making its own natural testosterone because it will figure, well, there's enough here already. I don't need to make any more. And it can actually have a reverse effect as to where they say that people who take steroids too much or inject too much testosterone, their body loses the ability or stops making its own, and it can actually have a negative effect. Well, I wonder if there is a similar thing that you can do in your lawn where you have nitrogen-fixing plants and they're like, hey, we got to make our own nitrogen because there ain't enough in the soil here. Well, I wonder if you could reverse that process by bombing your lawn with massive amounts of nitrogen and get those bacteria to go, well, we don't got to make no more nitrogen because there's so much here in the soil. Why are we making it? Let's just take a break. Let's take some time off. Maybe those Rhizomes or whatever they're called, the Rhizomes will take a little bit of a break and stop fixing nitrogen. I don't know if that's the case, but it makes sense to me that if you blow the lawn with nitrogen, maybe the clover will stop making its own. Now, here's one thing for sure, though. If you push your lawn hard with nitrogen, it's going to thicken up, and it's going to help to choke the clover out naturally. And that's the first thing I would tell you to do, is to build your lawn nice and thick. The other thing you want to do is make sure you're cutting tall. This is cool season grass because this is in Indiana. You want to cut as tall as you can because that will help the grass to compete. Turf competes better when it's mowed tall, at least cool season turf does. Mow it tall and let it help to crowd out the clover as you're feeding it and pushing it really, really hard with nitrogen. So that's the first couple things that I would do. And then the third thing that I would do is you can get any three-way herbicide, or you can go get Speed Zone if you want something that's a little bit more potent, but really 2,4-D and dicamba, those are the two active ingredients that you're going to want to knock out clover. I used to get some clover that would sneak into my lawn from Jake the Lawn Kid's house. I would just use regular three-way herbicide that, it had 2,4-D and dicamba in it, probably some quinclorac. Quinclorac isn't going to do anything for the clover. It's the dicamba and the 2,4-D. Maybe put in an ounce or two of baby shampoo per gallon with that mix to act as a sticker, act as a surfactant, and that should pretty much dry the clover up. The key will be to not mow before you spray it and not mow for a couple days after. Follow the label on the product that you use. Put that baby shampoo in there and let that act as a sticker. You may have to do a couple sequential applications 10 days apart, but that should really wipe the clover out pretty easy. The key is to get on it early. Get on it early, keep the lawn thick. Those two things together, along with adding that little bit of baby shampoo to the over-the-counter weed control, should wipe the clover out fairly easily. Now, the second question that Scott had was about foot traffic on the lawn. So this time of year, your kids are home. What are they going to do? They're going outside to play all day, and that's what kids should be doing. Send them outside to play. It's summertime. Let them get out and enjoy playing outside. And so he's saying he's got his kids playing baseball in the backyard, and that is definitely starting to cause some areas, especially, obviously baseball is played in a certain realm. You're always running the bases, so I can see the base paths very quickly wearing out, things like that, wherever the pitcher's standing, whatever. So the first thing I would say is, Scott, is do you have a way to rotate your field? Can you move the field of play? I don't know how big your backyard is, but can you move the field of play to another area and teach the kids, hey, we got to let this area over here rest. By the way, I'm sure that this is how sports field managers in the professional industry work too. They got to have some time off. This is why they don't play home games every single day, right? They need to have some time to let the turf rest. So maybe you can talk to the kids, hey, see how it's getting a little bit worn out over here? We're going to move you to this edge of the backyard. We're going to change the base paths a little bit. The other thing you can do, and I know we would do this when we were kids, is no matter how old you get, it's always fun to play wiffle ball. The thing about wiffle ball is you can play that in a much more confined space. You can play that in a different part of the yard. Maybe send the kids to the side yard or the front yard where they can play wiffle ball. Wiffle ball is always fun. You don't have to worry about breaking windows with it. You can swing away. You can hit the ball as hard and far as you want. You can pitch as fast, as hard as you want, and you're not going to hurt anything. So possibly maybe you're using the backyard for baseball because you got a hard ball back there. It's larger. You got area to fan out. You don't have to worry about breaking windows. So convince the kids, hey, you know what? Next week, wiffle ball all week. You're going to play that on the side yard. So that's another way to help the kids rotate, still keep playing baseball. And by the way, I think playing wiffle ball really helps your hand-eye coordination for sure, and it's always fun. The other thing you might want to do then is see if there's any friends that can have the baseball game at their house and tell them, look, we got to rotate the lawn here. We want your sports field, your playing field to stay nice, so we need to rotate. So you're going to have to go over to Johnny's house next week and give your lawn a week off. The idea would be to give that area a week on and a week off. I would really rather it get 2 weeks off, but give it a week on or a week off. Another way to give it some time off or to let the lawn rest a little bit is to convince the kids to play driveway sports. Why not go to basketball? Say, hey guys, you know what? Next week, we're going to let the lawn rest. You guys can play basketball out front all week, and we'll do this and this and that. The other thing I would tell you is play pickleball. I don't know if you guys have ever played pickleball. It's like tennis on the driveway. Pickleball is one of the funnest sports you will ever play in your life. It works well on a driveway. It works hand-eye coordination. It does a lot of things for you, but the most thing is it's fun. We played pickleball as kids. We didn't call it pickleball. We actually took beach tennis. There's a name for it, but it was these wooden paddles and this kind of semi-soft rubber ball that you could hit on the beach and hit back and forth on the beach. And we would take those and we would play those on the driveway. We'd set up a makeshift net and we would use those and we would play tennis over that way. But now they have official pickleball. The idea being here, Scott, is talk to the kids, let them know why their sports field is the way it is and why they need to rotate off of it, and convince them to try other things, do other things to let that lawn rest. Now, in the week that you do have the rest going on, here's what I'm going to recommend you do, is definitely get out and mow it every 2 days or every 3 days if you can. We want to focus the lawn to roots. So you want to cut it. Now, you don't want to cut it super tall either, because that's just not conducive for sports play. So if it's Kentucky bluegrass, go ahead and take it down to 2 3/4 or 3 inches for sure, and mow it as many days as you can during that time. The other thing you want to do is you want to encourage the compaction to come out of the lawn. Now, you can't go and rent an aerator and do that every single other week during the summer. And I'm not even convinced anymore that that's the best thing to do. And what I would say is get some of our Aerate product and hammer that in there. So what I would do is the very first day that they're not on it, I would hammer the Aerate down in there at a good solid 6 to 9 ounces per thousand and water it in deep. Break some bonds, break up the compaction, and allow the roots to start growing deep. The other thing I would do is put down RGS at 3 ounces per thousand. That's going to give you the root growth stimulant that you want, as well as it's going to pack some humic acid down in there, which is going to reoxygenate the soil, get the microbes kicked back up again, and it's just all about the roots. Obviously, watering is important. You want to water deep and infrequent, and only water in the mornings when you can. And then finally, the other thing you're going to want to do is use high potassium fertilizers. Potassium is a great stress reliever. So that all summer long, whenever you're fertilizing, get something that's got some potash content to it. Carbon X does 4%, but there's others out there that I can't think of any off the top of my head that have some higher potassium content. But as you're fertilizing every 4 or 5 weeks or so, you definitely want to get that in there to help for some stress relief. So I think all of those strategies together can be important. And I think the biggest part of that is, Scott, is that's really going to help your kids. Get them involved too and let them understand how they can affect the playing surface. How that, hey, you guys are out here improving your game, you're having fun playing ball, but I also want you to understand that you can also, have a better time if you will help me manage the playing surface. You will have a much better role if you help me with this. And let them get involved in the strategy and come up with ideas. Kids, by the way, that are playing on that field, if you have them to be cognizant of it, I bet you they'll come up with some good ideas too of how they can help improve the playing surface, and maybe even take pride in the fact that they have the best backyard baseball field that is around anywhere. So with that, I think all of those things will be good, especially that Father's Day is coming up. That might make a really good strategy for you and your kids to work on together. And as always, my friend, let's hope for the best. All right, our next one, let's go down and talk to Ricky about red thread disease. Ricky is in West Virginia.
Hey, Alan, this is Ricky from Strawsburg, Virginia. I got a little lemon here. I got a turf mixed with Kentucky bluegrass and perennial rye. But right now, my problem is I got a fungus mixed with melting out and red thread. And I know that you don't like to push the lawn with the heat. My temperatures are low 80s, a couple days in the 70s, but it's hot and humid. And I put down some slow-release nitrogen, but it seems to not be working, to get the lawn to grow and try to push it out. I just want to know what to do with it. I put down some fungicide, some propiconazole, and I just don't know what to do with it. If you could, let me know. Thanks.
All right, Ricky, this is a great question. It's one I think a lot of people are dealing with. I've had a few people come up and talk about red thread this year already, as well as dollar spot. And that's the first thing I want to talk about, is a lot of times red thread and dollar spot will get confused with each other, but that's okay because the treatment is the same. But if you want to make sure, what you want to first find out is that red thread still active? And the way that you'll do that is you'll get down and you'll see the areas that are infected, and you will literally be able to see the pink mycelium on the leaf blades. It is bright pink when you get close to it, especially if you put on polarized sunglasses. You will definitely be able to see that it's this pink tinge, and that's the mycelium on there. And if it's still, pink and it looks active and it feels a little bit moist, then definitely you're going to have to continue with your propiconazole applications. The same thing will go with dollar spot, because both of these applications or both of these diseases, by the way, dollar spot you'll notice by the hourglass lesions on the leaves. But either way, both of these are infections or diseases of the leaf tissue, and those are typically the easiest to get rid of. And that's why Ricky here is talking about pushing it out with nitrogen, because that's usually your first thing that you want to try, or your first remedy when you have a disease or a fungus on your lawn that is infecting the leaf tissue primarily. And so with red thread, you can push it out. And so that's where you're going to want to apply high nitrogen fertilizer. Now, you talked about putting some slow release down. I don't care if it's slow release, fast release, what release it is. You want to put it down, and you want to put it down a little bit hard. You want to feed the lawn hard. And what Ricky's saying is, Alan, I know you don't like to push it in the summer. I know that's not a good idea. And Ricky, you're exactly right. I don't like to push a ton of fast nitrogen in the summer. However, this goes back to what we talk about. There are times of give and take. There are times when you're going to have to break a rule for the good of the lawn overall. In this case, you need to be able to enjoy that lawn this summer. You need to help those things grow out like a bad hair job. So it's okay to push it. Just make sure your irrigation is in line, and definitely your mowing is in line. Catch the clippings all during this time, and you're going to have to probably mow every 3 days. So in this case, I would say forget about slow release, quick release, whatever. Get the highest nitrogen fertilizer you can find. Again, we have Carbon X that hopefully will be available here soon, which is 24% nitrogen. You can get Scott's Turf Builder at the store right now. I think it's even 33% nitrogen. Get down a full pound of nitrogen, whatever you choose, and push that out of there. Again, you're going to have to irrigate. You're going to have to keep mowing. You may get some hot days. It may stunt the grass, but you're going to have to just deal with that. You're going to have to just work through that, because you'd rather hurt the lawn now by pushing it and maybe taking a chance that it's going to, have a little bit of stress in summer, rather than have to just have it sit there stunted and live with the scarring. Now, again, if you find that the disease is still active, then you will need to continue treating with the propiconazole every 10 days. Spray it down. Definitely make sure you're using a liquid, which I believe you are, because the liquid will stick to the leaf surface. And that's the key with this, is we want that fungicide to coat those lesions and coat those mycelium, and anywhere that the disease is on the leaf, we want that fungicide to coat that, because that's how it's going to work. So if you continue with that, it is okay in summer or right now, if you've got red thread or you have dollar spot and you need to push it out, it is okay to go ahead and break the rule that I tell you and not push hard nitrogen in the summer, and go ahead and do it. And that's what I keep getting back to through a lot of these concepts that we're following, is I give you hard and fast rules because those are the safest way to go. But there are always times when you're going to have to break a rule. And these are not rules like cardinal sins here. These are rules like guidelines. Guidelines are there inside the box, but sometimes you do have to go outside the box, and your lawn will understand that. Just don't stay outside the box for too long. One other thing that you'll want to do, and I started doing this, I had some brown spots in my Zoysia and also some in my St. Augustine. I don't know exactly what they were. I don't think it was dollar spot. It definitely was not Rhizoctonia or brown patch at all. I had some spots in there coming out of the winter, and what I did is I took our dethatch product and I mixed it up at 6 ounces per 1,000, and I spot sprayed it. I painted the spots, the dead spots, the disease spots, I painted them black with the dethatch. And here's the reason why. Dethatch has molasses in it, and what that molasses does is it stimulates the microbes that are there to come up and feed on the molasses. And as they do that, they're going to feed on any dead leaf tissue that's there, any dead grass that's there. That's why you coat the dead grass, in this case, disease spots, or in a larger case, thatch, you coat it with this product. And that molasses draws the microbes out. It gets them all excited. They go into a feeding frenzy, and they eat up all the dead grass. Well, it works with thatch, but it also works with the disease spots. Anything that's dead in the lawn. Dead grass is dead grass. It doesn't matter if it died from disease. It doesn't matter if it died from thatch. It doesn't matter if it died from your propane torch. It doesn't matter if it died because you set your grill top there and left it and the lawn died underneath. It doesn't matter why. If it's dead lawn and you spray dethatch there, the molasses is going to stimulate those microbes to come up and eat the dead grass away. So one of the ways that you can get rid of disease scarring, which I think, Ricky, is one of the things that you might be dealing with here, is to spray the disease spots with dethatch. Now, again, if you find that the red thread is still active, go ahead and still apply the propiconazole, but mix the propiconazole and the dethatch together. There's nothing wrong with that, and paint those spots black that way. That is definitely a way to help cure up the scars faster. The dethatch does not cure the disease. but it makes the scarring go away much, much faster, which makes you think that the disease is cured up. Because that's one of the things that a lot of folks deal with the disease is they have to deal with the aftermath of it. So by using the dethatch to clear it up quicker, that's one strategy that you can use. And I've used it here, and it works very, very well. And of course, as always, Ricky, let's hope for the best. Now let's head back down to Texas. We're going to go to Fort Worth.
Hi, Alan. This is Craig calling from Fort Worth, Texas. Hey, I consider myself a reasonably capable lawn care nut. I have a pretty nice Bermuda lawn, and I'm always looking for ways and opportunities to make it even better. As part of having a healthy Bermuda grass in general, and lawn in general, I also have a heavy and healthy infestation of St. Augustine grass in my backyard. As part of my obsession to have the greatest lawn on the street, I want to get rid of that St. Augustine infestation. I'm looking for help with possible or potential solutions to help me get rid of it. I'm open to anything, natural, chemical, whatever options are out there that would be effective. I'm hoping you can shed some light and help me make my lawn even better. Thanks. Bye.
All right, Craig, this is a great question. The reason this one's great is because it really makes me think opposite of what I normally do. So for those of you that watch the channel, you know that I actually have the opposite problem, and I talk about it ad nauseum, it seems like. And what that problem is I have a primarily St. Augustine grass lawn, and I have Floratam in one spot, and I get wild Bermuda that invades my Floratam, and there's absolutely nothing that you can do for it. Craig, on the other hand, has the opposite problem in that he has a primary Bermuda grass lawn, and he's dominating with that, but he's got St. Augustine invading. So the first thing we want to do is stop more from coming in. Is that possible? In my lawn, where I have the Bermuda invading my St. Augustine, it's not possible. I can't keep it out. It doesn't matter. But the opposite actually can happen. And so, Craig, the first thing I want you to do is figure out where is this St. Augustine grass coming from. My assumption is that one or all of your neighbors, front, back, sides, wherever, have St. Augustine grass, and it's coming across with stolons. And that's where I want to talk about prevention, because the thing that makes St. Augustine so aggressive and makes St. Augustine so strong is also one of the things that makes it weak, and that is that it can only spread via stolons. So let's talk about those two things, stolons and rhizomes. Bermuda spreads by both. Stolons are what you'd call above ground or just at the surface of the ground runners, and that's how our warm season grass takes over. Zoysia does this, Centipede does this, St. Augustine does this, and Bermuda does this. They send stolons across the top of the lawn, and you'll see them. They move out and they creep, and every so often they'll stop and create a nodule. That nodule will then send roots down. It will send grass blades up, and then the stolon keeps moving, and that's how it takes ground. It's really interesting to watch, and in fact, I've showed in videos that I've neglected areas of my lawn and the back lawn, and stolons will crawl up in through bushes and hedges, over the top and down the other side and reroot in. These stolons are super aggressive. They're super strong. They're super fat. They're full of water, and they move and they take ground. That is the biggest strength of St. Augustine, is that it only has to put energy into stolons that can march across the ground, and it can take ground very quickly when it has enough water and obviously nutrients. However, that's also its weakness, because it can only spread by moving across the top of the ground. You can very easily stop it with a landscape curb or a landscape border. It doesn't even have to be dug into the ground that deeply. It just has to really sit up out of the ground a few inches, and then you can just weed whack along it or edge along it, and that St. Augustine will not invade anymore. It doesn't matter how aggressive it is. As long as you keep it weed whacked against that curbing, it's not going to go underneath, and you'll be fine. It won't invade anymore. Now that's different, and that's opposed to your Bermuda grass, which if you put a curb up that's not deep enough, it will just go underneath the curb and continue going on the other side, because rhizomes, they creep across the ground or just under the ground. They do the same thing. They creep under the ground, and ever so often they'll send grass blades up, and they'll send roots down. Rhizomes and stolons do the same thing. That's why I talked about why I like my zoysia grass so much too, because it creates this really super thick, dense mat of rhizomes and stolons that weeds can't get into. And Bermuda can do the same thing. However, when the Bermuda and the St. Augustine are together, and they don't play nice, because the strength of the St. Augustine keeps it alive enough that the Bermuda cannot choke it out. And so the first thing I would say then is let's stop the problem, let's stop the bleeding, and see what you can do to put up some sort of border or curbing around the edges of the lawn so no more comes in. So that's strategy number one, Craig, is to stop it by stopping those stolons from spreading. Now, the next part of the strategy then would be mowing. And this is where you have an advantage with your Bermuda. I would definitely start mowing your Bermuda as low as you can. If you can get a real mower, If you can reel cut it, that's going to be best. Get it down to less than an inch. Now, if that's not a case, because listen, reel mowing is a real commitment. I know there's a ton of guys on YouTube now that are mowing their lawns with a reel, and it's awesome, and their lawns definitely dominate. There is nothing more beautiful than a reel mown lawn. And by the way, you can do it with Zoysia. You can do it with Bermuda. I've seen a guy who reel mows his St. Augustine. I don't think he takes it to 5/8 inch. In fact, I'm sure he doesn't. He takes it like to 2 inches, but he reel mows his St. Augustine. You can reel mow Kentucky bluegrass. You can reel mow perennial rye. There are a lot of things that you can reel mow, and you can get them down well below an inch, but St. Augustine ain't one of them. So if you can put that commitment into reel mow, that'd be awesome. But I realize that's a commitment that 99% of the people that listen to this podcast and watch my shows cannot commit to. But what you can do is you can get a really good rotary mower, and you can get that down to 1 inch or 1 1/4 inches for sure. And I can tell you that 1 1/4 inch cut, that 1 1/4 inch height of cut on Bermuda is beautiful, and 1 1/4 inch height of cut on St. Augustine is devastating. St. Augustine cannot handle a cut that low. So that's the first thing I would try to do is mow it out. I would mow my Bermuda every day for a month. I'm serious. Every single day. Mow the lawn every day for a month at 1 inch. Your Bermuda will love you. It will send out more rhizomes and more stolons than it ever has, and the St. Augustine will be retreating, wondering what the heck is going on. Now, after you've mowed for that month and you've put that commitment on, I guarantee you that St. Augustine grass in the back, it's going to be a lot smaller. It's going to be definitely retreated. What is left, that I would recommend you glyphosate out. Now, I don't know how big your backyard is. I don't know how much deal you're dealing with here, but I would get some glyphosate Roundup. I would put that into a pump sprayer, and I would go and I would spot spray as carefully as you can what's left. What's left are going to be what you call mother plants. It's going to be wherever the St. Augustine retreated to its strongest spots, its strongest areas, because remember, you've mowed a good majority of it out. By the way, there's nothing wrong before you glyphosate with picking and pulling out as many of those big fat stolons from that St. Augustine as you can find. Just go out there and yank them out. But after doing that month of mowing and yanking out those stolons, whatever's left, spot spray with glyphosate and literally spray it out. Just kill it. You're going to lose some of your Bermuda. You're going to have some Bermuda that's going to also die back. Just be careful. Spray where you can. Overspray is okay. But what's going to happen is, I promise you, as you continue with the low mowing, which you need to continue doing, by the way, after the month, I don't expect you to mow every single day. Mow every 3 days from there. Get back onto a regular schedule. But what you're going to find is that the Bermuda is going to creep right back in. It's going to take right over much quicker than any St. Augustine that may have survived. And I guarantee you, if you do the glyphosate right, very little, if any, will survive anyway. And from there, you should be able to control it after that with just hand pulls. Now, that's a lot of work. I realize that what I've just told you is a lot of work, but you only have to do that lot of work one time. It's 1 month of your life, maybe 6 weeks, where you really have to get in and go after it that way. And then from there, you can just pretty much manage it with hand pulling. You can manage it from there fairly easily. So you are going to have to put that extra bit of work in now, Craig, but I know that when you do that, that it'll pay off for you. You'll get rid of that St. Augustine that's in the back, and you'll have that beautiful Bermuda barefoot lawn that you've been looking for. By the way, you should check out Reel Low Dad, REEL for real, if you want to see a guy that is actually working on his own Bermuda lawn. He mows with a reel, and he shows you everything that he does inside and out. He makes his own sprayers, all kinds of stuff, and his lawn is really progressing. You can see it really coming along, and it looks beautiful, and he is somebody that has that commitment that they can do with a reel, so you might want to consider watching that channel a little bit too. That's called Reel Low Dad. That's my friend Mike, and he actually can show you how to do a reel, because that might be something that's in your future if you really want to dominate with that Bermuda, Craig. And now for our last one, this one's going to be one that I know is going to help a lot of you. So let's go now up to Peoria, Illinois.
Hey, Alan, this is Leonard from Peoria, Illinois. I'm calling because I have been following your program now for about 3 years, and I've noticed that about 7 days after every Milorganite application, I do get some of that blue-green up from the nitrogen, but it is splotchy throughout my lawn. So I don't know if the grass is having a problem digesting it or something like that. I saw on Connor's channel that he suggests using humic acid to assist in that. Anyway, I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
Leonard, do your friends call you Lenny? I love the name Lenny, so I'm going to call you Lenny. I hope that's okay, my friend. So I get this more often than you would think, where people do an application. It's not always just with Milo, but we'll talk about that in a minute, but they do an application and it comes out splotchy. And you've been doing this for 3 years, so you have quite a bit of experience. So let's talk through this just a little bit. The first thing I'm going to ask is, are the splotchy areas consistent? You've been doing this for 3 years now, so are the areas that turn the blue always the same? And I can bet you that they are. And the reason is because one of the greatest strengths of Milorganite is also one of its greatest drawbacks. So let's talk about the strengths of Milorganite or biosolid fertilizers, because there's a lot out there. There's the Menards brand, there's Sunnyland All Natural that you can get down here in the South, there's Huactinite, there's all kinds of biosolids. Milorganite is just the one we know the most about. But one of the things about it is slow release because it is an organic fertilizer. And so slow release means that it's going to release its nutrients over time. And in the case of Milorganite, it takes about 8 to 10 days. If things are, if temperatures are up there in the 70s or higher, it takes 8 to 10 days to see full results. If it's really hot out, 80s or higher, you might see results in 7 days, but that is definitely a slow release product. It's going to release nitrogen slowly as well as iron, and that's going to give that lawn that blue-green look. Milorganite has an analysis of 640, 6% nitrogen. That means that 6% of everything in the bag is nitrogen, and if you put down 12 pounds of that product across each 1,000 square feet, 6% of the 12 pounds is going to deliver 3/4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. Tons of videos I've done about that on nitrogen calculations and all that, but that's a lot. 12 pounds. It feels like if you're somebody that's coming from Scott's, that is typically a 3 or 4 pounds per thousand application rate, which is what most of the Scott's products are, and you come to Milorganite, that's 12 pounds per thousand, just think about that. That's a lot. However, it's great for beginners because beginners want to throw down a lot. In fact, a lot of us DIYers, homeowners, we think throwing down more is better, and in a lot of cases it is. But the way that you can squelch that or scratch that itch is to use Milorganite because you get to throw down a lot and you're still okay. You're still within guidelines. 12 pounds per thousand will definitely scratch the itch of throwing down a lot of fert, but you're only getting 3/4 pounds of in. I hope you see that. It's an advantage. However, the fact that you have to throw down so much and it's slow release is also one of its greatest drawbacks, and that is if you get a lot of rain, there is so much product on the ground, it will wash the product into low spots. And so that's the question I'm going to ask first here, Lenny, is are those spots always the same blue spots? And if that's the case, what I think is happening is that rains are moving the Milorganite to the low spots because it's slow release and because there's so much of it, that's what you're seeing. I think that's probably the first thing. It could also be that there are slopes. I've definitely seen this with a lot of different fertilizers, but with Milorganite, where the bottom of the slope will get much darker green than the top of a slope because literally the Milorganite is pulled down, or you'll see it in areas where maybe you have a trench that is there where water's flowing through a trench. The Milorganite will settle in the trench or at the bottom of a ditch. A lot of different things to look at. So, Lenny, that's the first thing I would do, my brother, is look for those low spots. And are those the spots where you're seeing this happen? And if that's the case, you can consider maybe switching to a liquid fertilizer that will be absorbed much quicker because obviously a liquid is the smallest particle size you can get, so you can get that watered in. Because, by the way, watering Milorganite in does not help it. Milorganite needs heat, which stimulates microbes, and the microbes munch on the Milorganite, and they release the nitrogen for you. That's what makes it slow release, by the way. Whereas if you use a liquid, you just water that right into the soil. It gets in there much quicker, whereas the Milorganite has to sit up there. So that's one of the things to think about. This is also where learning your land is important. And when I say this, because you've been doing this for 3 years, you may actually start to take for granted that some of those low spots exist, right? You know your land so well that you overlook the low spots. You're just used to them. You're used to the trenches or the ruts or the hole, whatever. You don't have holes in your lawn, but you get what I'm saying. You get used to that, and then you forget, oh yeah, that's right, I do have a low spot there. Maybe that's what's happening. So that's one of the other sides to learning your land is you sometimes can take for granted different things. So think about it in those terms, Lenny, and maybe what you want to do is switch up your fertilizer to a liquid or switch up to a different product. Again, I've talked about Scott's Turf Builder. They don't sponsor this, but it's one of those things you can get everywhere. That's got some slow release and some fast release nitrogen in it. So maybe go get some Scott's Turf Builder and put an application of that down. I guarantee you it's not going to be 12 pounds per thousand. It's going to be more like 3 or 4. Put that down and see if you get that same result. Do you get the same blue spots or green spots or whatever with a Scott's Turf Builder that you did with the Milorganite? I bet you won't, but it won't have anything to do with the soil in certain areas. It's very rare that you're going to have a property the size of even an acre property. It would be very rare that you would have even an acre property where the soil in the back would be different than the soil in the front, or at least that much different to where it would take on Milorganite or take Milorganite in different. I don't know, soil composition doesn't vary that much. So I definitely don't think this is anything to do with the soil. I definitely think this is something to do with fertilizer movement or something to do with low spots in that regard. Now, there is one other possibility that I thought of here, and I want you to call me back once you hear this podcast, Lenny. Call back and leave a message and let me know. We'll do an update on it because I want to get to the bottom of this. So go through those couple strategies for me and see if that makes a difference. And when I say go through those strategies, if you know there's low spots and those are not the green spots that you're seeing or the dark blue spots, I would still tell you to go get some Scott's, turf builder or whatever, put that down and see if you get the same reaction, and then call me back and let me know. Because here's the other thing that I thought of that could be happening here. It could be that someone seeded certain spots in your lawn. And again, you tell me that there's spots that turn blue or green after the Milo and spots that don't. I don't know if these are spots the size of a basketball, the size of a Volkswagen, or, sizes 1,000 square feet or bigger. I don't know that. But it could be, if they're larger spots, that at some point somebody seeded with a different variety of grass in certain spots. Maybe they had a pool in the backyard, for example, that they took out the pool. I've seen this happen quite a few times. And what they'll do is they'll get 100% Kentucky bluegrass blend, and they will seed the area where the pool was with that 100% Kentucky bluegrass blend. That's very pure and going to be very dark blue. But the rest of the lawn is a mix of bluegrass, fescue, and rye, and it doesn't get as dark. You could see that. Now, obviously, you would know if you had a pool there that you filled in because it'd be a perfect circle, but there can be other things that have happened. An area of the lawn died out. Someone spilled something. An area of the lawn died out. Somebody left a tent up too long. An area of the lawn died up because they moved a shed. An area of the lawn died because they had to cut down a tree. A lot of different things can happen, and people will seed the lawn with something that is completely different from the rest. Now, most cool season lawns, they're all going to blend together, but like I said, I've seen it where people get like a completely Kentucky bluegrass blend that will not blend with a lawn that has a lot of fescue and rye and old school Kentucky bluegrass in it. So it might be one of those things where somebody's reseeded areas with something different. The other thing I thought of is maybe you have a bent grass problem in some areas. Bent grass is quite the problem, especially in Indiana and Illinois and up through that way. You'll have a lot of bent grass that invades the lawn, especially in low-lying areas or areas that are wet. You will see bent grass there, and that definitely has a different texture, different color, and will react differently to fertilizer than Kentucky bluegrass, rye, and fescue. So, Lenny, those are just a couple ideas to think about. Make sure you call me back and let me know what you come up with as you try a couple different things. And that's been really the whole theme of this podcast, guys, is to get you to think outside the guidelines, to think outside the box, to think outside the rules, and don't always be scared of things. Get out there, try new things. It's okay to break a few guidelines and break a few rules, to flex, to understand how to get things through, whether it's foot traffic, whether it's weather traffic, too much rain, too much heat, not being able to mow, or in this case, areas that turn splotchy. Get out and try something different and see if the results are the same or different. Make notes, and then always hope for the best. So I hope this podcast has been helpful to you. I feel like this one didn't flow quite as well. I am a little bit out of my element here, being in a new studio. I don't have things, I don't have my workflow the way I want. So I hope this was helpful to you, though. I hope that you all get something out of it. Please continue to subscribe here. Don't forget to check out my website, thelawncarenut.com. We have Father's Day sale going on, even though it's probably too late for Father's Day shipping. By the time you hear this, you can still treat yourself and get a nice delivery after Father's Day of next week. So don't forget to visit thelawncarenut.com. And as always, I'm Alan Hain, the Lawn Care Nut. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the lawn.